In a world of great diversity, there is one unique global presence in banking and financial services. It is unique in its composition and strength. It is an interactive network of businesses that span 100 countries with 300,000 employees and 200 million customer accounts. This is Citi.
We are entrepreneurial,
innovative,
experienced,
creative,
dynamic,
focused,
diverse, global.
Our brand is powerful.
our reach unparalleled,
We are the model for the industry.
determined to succeed.
To go beyond expectations.
To challenge the norm.
We have the depth, the resources,
The history.
We invest in families,
Companies, countries,
And the communities we serve.
Through volunteerism,
financial education,
and global environmentalism.
Our highest priority
is keeping our clients' interest above all else, with integrity, honesty.
and by establishing relationships built on
Trust.
we're part of a legacy.
For rich heritage.
we are connected to
Our clients
To each other,
and the franchise.
We are Citi.
We are Citi.
We are Citi.
Our reputation rests on the integrity and dedication of those that came before us. Each of us continues to write Citi's history, and it is up to us to enhance, not diminish, our legacy, our reputation, and our place in the world. In the words of Winston Churchill, the farther backward you can look, the farther forward you are likely to see. 1812, New York City. The Bank of the United States, founded by Alexander Hamilton, the architect of America's financial system, is dealt a serious blow when it loses its charter in the aftermath of a bitter political struggle.
Citibank owes its origin to the failure of the Bank of the United States to be rechartered in 1811. And a number of groups of merchants came forward to replace them. And some Republicans, led by Samuel Osgood, who was a politician as much as he was a banker, formed a group to charter the Citibank of New York.
On September 14th, the Citibank of New York opens for business at 52 Wall Street, the former offices of the Bank of the United States.
No other firm has been in a leadership position for so long. No other firm has played such an important role in the overall development of American banking, be that in investment banking in the early years, in consumer banking, in international banking. Citibank has, time after time, been able to bounce back from very tough environments.
1818, London. J. Henry Schroeder and Company is founded. A year later, offices open in Hamburg.
They always had an international outlook. London had become, by that time, the most important financial center in the world. England had the Industrial Revolution. It was creating capital, and that capital was being used to develop railways in South America or in the United States, and financing trade in Eastern Europe and in Asia, and ultimately all over the world.
New York City evolves into the most vital port in the country. Isaac Wright, president of Citibank in the 1820s, helps establish the United States' first scheduled monthly transatlantic shipping service, known as the Blackball Line. This is an early example of Citibank's commitment to the progress of expanding trade and commerce, and ultimately to our clients. 1822, the founding of the oldest trust company in the U.S. From the beginning, the Farmers Loan and Trust Company would work closely with Citibank in managing the finances of some of America's most prominent families. A century later, a formal merger would take place. This would mark the beginning of Citi's wealth management business, with Farmers Trust being the parent company of today's private bank. Over the next decade, Citibank gains an enviable reputation for stability and solvency, keeping substantial cash reserves on hand. Moses Taylor becomes president of the bank in 1856, and under his leadership, Citibank's deposits and its reputation continue to grow.
Moses Taylor introduced a policy of high liquidity. In future panics, instead of people rushing to get their money out of Citibank, people actually looked to Citibank as a source of strength and would actually bring their money to Citibank for deposit.
Taylor's Citibank would also establish the investment syndicate for the first transatlantic cable, laying the foundation for global telecommunications. 1861, America plunges into civil war. In response to President Lincoln's plea for financial support, Moses Taylor, with the support of his Citibank, solicits over a $70 million subscription in gold. 1864, the National Banking Act is passed. The Citibank of New York joins the U.S. banking system and changes its name to the National Citibank of New York. 1869, Japan plans to build its first railway, a transportation link from Tokyo to Yokohama. The project is rejected by banks across Europe until J. Henry Schroeder and Company of London steps in. Schroeder's underwrites the project. Japan builds its railway, and the 1870 Japan Customs Loan makes Schroeder's one of the world's leading merchant banks.
The business with Japan continued over very many years, and I know that Schroeder's never had to take a loss from dealing with any Japanese client, which is a quite remarkable thing. We were loyal to them, but they were very loyal to Schroeder's.
Enter Jay Cook, a legend in the history of finance.
Jay Cook was the mastermind of what became the syndicate process. His ability to bring firms into the sale of bonds to help finance the Union in the Civil War. And he raised about $2 billion nationally, and I believe a small part of it was actually done internationally.
At war's end, Jay Cook focuses his underwriting interests into building the second transcontinental railway by heavily investing in the Northern Pacific Railroad. By 1873, Jay Cook's firm is overextended. The Northern Pacific Railroad goes under and takes Jay Cook and Company down with it.
In 1873, Jay Cook got trapped. He had agreed to sell the bonds. He wasn't able to do it. Therefore, he couldn't fulfill his engagements, and he failed.
With his business in ruin, Jay Cook, true to his values, remains committed to his obligations, both business and personal.
Jay Cook was able to pay them all back and did everything he could, and I think gave up almost all of his wealth. It gets back to integrity, professionalism, and loyalty. He was certainly loyal to the people he owed his money to.
Mr. Cook's son-in-law, Charles D. Barney, who had run Cook's stock department, opens his own firm in December 1873. He acquires the clients of Jay Cook and Company. Investment banker Edward Smith opens his firm in 1892, and both firms move to New York City, taking seats on the New York Stock Exchange. Smith and Barney merge in 1938. From the day they opened their doors, Smith Barney has always maintained an impeccable reputation.
Smith Barney. They make money the old-fashioned way. They earn it.
By the mid-1800s, the Russian Empire occupies much of modern-day Poland.
In the late 19th century, the developed countries were Western Europe. England, the Netherlands, France. When you get to Russia, they're looking and they're behind, and they're saying, well, how did say Germany catch up? And they say, well, the big banks in Germany helped Germany a great deal. The backwardness of Russia, including Poland, leading to the formation of banks that are going to bring these more backward areas into the modern world. And so both in Poland and in Russia, you see the development of new banking organizations.
As Poland begins to industrialize, Leopold Kronenberg, a key economic organizer and chief architect of the Warsaw-Vienna Railway, creates a new bank. April 30th, 1870, Bank Handlowy debuts as the premier Polish bank for trade and investments with Russia and Western Europe, and remains so to this day. 1884, Mexico. Banco Nacional Mexicano merges with Banco Mercantil Mexicano to form Banamex. Not even General Pancho Villa and the Mexican Revolution can slow Mexico's leading bank.
The history of Banamex is intimately close to the history of Mexico. The bank has been a principal actor, not just a bank, a principal actor on the development of the Mexican companies that it serves and the country that it serves.
1891, New York City. The National City Bank of New York is under the leadership of James Stillman. Stillman's strength emerges as he forms successful alliances with the wealthy and powerful, such as William Rockefeller of Standard Oil, E.H. Harriman of the Union Pacific Railroad, and Jacob H. Schiff of Kuhn Loeb and Company.
In the space of 17, 18 years, Stillman transformed the bank from a bank for merchants into a national corporate bank, the leading finance bank, and one that also served the government of the United States.
1894, National City Bank becomes the largest bank in the U.S. And by 1897, Stillman expands the franchise when he opens a foreign exchange department.
Stillman saw an opportunity for the bank by opening a foreign exchange department to meet the demands of its customers. And the foreign exchange department opened in 1897, and I believe 2 to 3 years later, the bank was able to make the promise that it would be able to pay out any sum of money anywhere in the world within 24 hours.
1901 and the dawn of the 20th century. Marcellus Hartley, owner of Remington Arms, is granted a charter by the state of Connecticut for a new bank. The International Banking Corporation is chartered to do business around the world. IBC opens its first branch in Shanghai in 1902, making it the first American bank in Asia. 5 more branches soon follow: Manila, Singapore, Yokohama, Hong Kong, and Calcutta. 2 years later, the International Banking Corporation opens in Panama City. It is the lead bank for the construction of a canal 50 miles across the Isthmus of Panama.
Citibank, al venir a Panamá, como estábamos hablando recientemente, en 1904, hizo posible que se lograra construir esa obra, que es uno de los milagros de la ingeniería en el mundo, que le dio una presencia a Panamá y permitió que Panamá avanzara más rápidamente comparado con sus vecinos.
O sea, ningún país estuvo tan cerca del nacimiento de una república, ninguna operación del banco estuvo tan cerca del nacimiento de una república a forjar su estructura y su crecimiento, como ha sido la operación de Citigroup en Panamá.
To these bankers, new languages and cultures are a challenge. The solution is to hire local expertise and become a trusted local bank. Today, over 98% of our employees are local.
What's unique about us is that we started so early and that we built in each of the markets strong domestic franchises. And that is a legacy I believe that we should cherish. It's a legacy that we should build on.
That was the beginning of moving outside of New York. Starting with Frank Vanderlip, it became a world bank. He was a visionary. He took advantage of the Federal Reserve Act, which he was involved in, and put a sentence or two in there about how banks are allowed to go overseas. And the result of that was that Citibank opened up an office in Buenos Aires in 1914. Vanderlip's vision is really responsible for the fact that this is the world's leading bank.
1915. National City Bank acquires majority interest in the International Banking Corporation, and expansion accelerates through Asia, Central and South America, and Europe. 1910. Our story shifts to 3 brothers.
Arthur, Herbert, and Percy formed a firm called Solomon Brothers, and they put $5,000 worth of capital in. But it wasn't the only capital. They needed some more, and so they found Morton Hutzler, who owned a seat on the New York Stock Exchange, and contributed that seat as capital to the firm. So the firm became Solomon Brothers and Hutzler. With the passing of the Federal Reserve Act, Solomon Brothers and Hutzler was the second firm to become a reporting dealer to the Fed. This firm now is the longest, with all its iterations, the longest continuously reporting firm to the Federal Reserve.
1924. Solomon Brothers recognizes the need for a better information flow for executing their client transactions. The first modern trading room is created.
When I started, all the traders sat in the same room. It was at 60 Wall Street, and there was a big open floor. They were just long rows of desks, and they enabled our traders to communicate with each other immediately. The trading room generated a certain noise level. When it was busy and there was noise and something, there was a sense of urgency, you know, the adrenaline movement and so on.
This marks the beginning of numerous innovations by Salomon Brothers, including revolutionizing the bond business with collateralized mortgage obligations and mortgage-backed bonds. 1921, consumer banking firsts begin when National City Bank opens its first branch in New York City, and Charlie Mitchell becomes president of the bank.
Mitchell was really the founder of the consumer bank, and Citibank's consumer deposits really exponentiated during the 20s because of interest-bearing accounts and also the fact that you could get an unsecured personal loan. Before these loans came along, people would have to go to loan sharks and pay enormous rates of interest in order to borrow money.
Charlie Mitchell is remembered by some as a controversial figure for his involvement in the securities market. However, his role in the creation of the consumer banking business cannot be overlooked.
In terms of what Mitchell did for the bank, or the National City Organization, it was really a tremendous contribution, and Mitchell really drove the National City Organization to new heights.
Walter Wriston has to be regarded as the most important banker of the second half of the 20th century because of various innovations, leasing contracts, term loans, then the negotiable CD, the Eurodollars, selling commercial paper through the holding company. Banking becomes true financial intermediation. I think Wriston was one of the first to see that this was the way banking was going.
Walt saw that the growth of the consumer market was critical, and the consumer market could give the bank the growth that Walt wanted the overall enterprise to have.
The first big advance of the consumer business was a thing called the Citi card. The man that was really most responsible was named Jack Scanlon. And he said, well, what does everybody want to know? And I said, most people want to know, how much money do I have in the bank? Oh, he said, I'll be back in 90 days. No problem. And I didn't believe him. He came back and he had the first T1 terminal and a thing called the Citi card. And he stuck it in and my balance came up. Then he designed the first ATM. And then the ATM spread out and then the consumer business took off.
That's what an innovator is, somebody who sees the way banking could go and the way the world's going to go before other people do. And then once Citibank brought in these innovations, others followed.
1965, John Shepard Reed rolls into the bank. So John is selected to take over the back office of Citibank in 1970. He took us from last to first, implementing an unbelievable amount of advanced technology using his engineering background. And by 1974, we were on everybody's list as the best managed back office of any financial institution in New York.
The bank's unparalleled success in the consumer franchise certainly has two fathers. One is Walt with the vision, the other is John with the actual implementation.
One of the real issues in banking is who is in control. I'm the customer, it's my money, and yet the bank acts as if I can't get at it, I don't own it, it's not mine. I have to ask their permission to get it. We wanted to communicate control to the customer. We use technology to do that.
Through Wriston and Reed, the world gets a revolution in consumer banking, and Citi, a rich legacy of innovation. 1950, another first. Frank McNamara invents a new system of credit called the Diners Club. The Dine Now, Pay Later concept is revolutionary and launches the consumer credit card business. By 1981, Diners Club becomes part of the Citi Cards family, already a leading bank card issuer around the world. Citi Cards would continue to grow, introducing co-branded cards and a host of consumer protection innovations. The final key to the equation is another visionary, who would become Citi's architect and co-founder, Sanford I. Weill.
Wall Street had kind of been in the doldrums, obviously, during the 30s. Then you had the war years, the 40s. And in the 50s, at least after Korea, then it started to pick up.
I started a company in 1960 called Carter, Berlin, Patoma, and Weill. And that little company in the decade of the 1970s, through a lot of mergers, went from being a company with one office to the second largest retail brokerage company in the country.
All the transactions were being done by hand, and as the volume expanded, very few firms had the capability of processing this increased volume with any kind of efficiency. And computers were just being developed. Control Data came out with a computer. It cost $12 million. And nobody really had the drive to buy this computer except Sandy.
Our little company bought Hayden Stone, which was a company that had major operational problems and balance sheet problems, but yet had been very good. And we were buying a company that was 28 times our size. I think the Hayden Stone acquisition got me over the fear of taking a big step. Through the rest of the decade of the 70s, we bought Hentz in 73, which doubled our size. In 74, we bought Shearson Hamel, which doubled it again. And at the end of the decade, we bought Loeb Rhodes Hornblower, which doubled the size of everything that we had done to that point in time.
1981, American Express acquires Shearson Loeb Rhodes, and 2 years later, Weil is named president of American Express. But in 1985, Weil resigns.
I turned in corporate jets for a tourist seat on the commuter flight to Baltimore.
1986, Baltimore was home to a struggling firm called Commercial Credit, now known as Citi Financial. Founded in 1912, Commercial Credit was a pioneer in the consumer finance industry. In 1916, Commercial Credit offered an installment loan program that helped people purchase automobiles. This led to the development of installment buying plans for home appliances and other consumer goods.
Sandy always had the vision. He used to talk repeatedly about building the finest financial services organization in the country. I don't think we ever thought about being global in those days.
In 1988, Commercial Credit acquires Primerica, a major grassroots financial services company, which had recently acquired Smith Barney. Primerica was established in 1977 with the intention of helping middle-income families with the buy term and invest the difference philosophy. In 1993, Sandy Weil acquires Travelers Insurance, and the new company is renamed Travelers Group.
We acquired and merged many companies that, quite frankly, nobody else wanted. They were seen as troubled institutions, and quite frankly, Sandy had this ability to see the real value in them if they were run properly. It wasn't just a matter of fixing up something that was broken. There were real value, either in people or in the balance sheet, in the franchise itself.
In 1993, Sandy buys back Shearson from American Express.
Shearson fell on hard times after Sandy left American Express, and then Shearson made a lot of mistakes. New management came into American Express and decided to just get out of the brokerage business, and Sandy Weil was thrilled to get it back.
That increased the size of Smith Barney fourfold, so we really became a major factor in the securities business again.
Weil's journey culminates in 1998 as he masterminds the merger of Travelers Group with Citicorp to form Citigroup, the largest financial institution in the world.
What we are doing is creating a model of the financial services company of the future.
We are talking about a restructuring of the financial service industry that directionally is the way that most people have thought that it would be going.
The most exciting thing that I ever did was speaking to John Reed about merging Travelers and Citicorp and helping position this company to be a leader for decades to come.
The merger not only creates the phenomenon called Citigroup, but it also marks the beginning of the end of the decades-long struggle to repeal the 1933 Glass-Steagall Act.
In the year that followed our consolidation, I think that led people to think about a change. The industries coalesced and we were able to work together. And within a year, that legislation was passed and signed by President Clinton. While the law has changed, we are always changing our model so that we can always be a leader.
Shortly after the merger, Robert Rubin, former U.S. Secretary of the Treasury, would join Citigroup, raising the company's stature in the global community.
One of the things that struck me about Citigroup before I decided to come here was that probably almost alone amongst the world's financial institutions, it has an embedded position in a very large number of countries around the world. And that's not something you can build quickly. a local position, a position in which you really are functioning like a local financial institution, but you have all the strengths of a global financial institution, is something that takes a long time to build. It is a great, great asset of this institution.
The leaders we've had in the past built our reputation with a legacy of integrity and trust through innovation and by putting our clients' interests above all else. The values they embodied are the same values we bring to work every day in order to be successful.
I think our company has learned that reputational risk is every bit as important as credit risk and market risk.
First come from something. First is an event. I think it comes from integrity, commitment to client, the ability to work together, to respect the person, and the ability to judge a person on merit alone.
We had a gentleman who ran our training program, was a former Air Force general. General Coulter was his name. And I remember his distinctly telling everybody, no matter what you do, never do anything that will injure the name of Smith Barney.
Long-term loyalty to clients is terribly important. For example, at Schroders, we always took the view that the client of longer standing is the one that we should in fact show greater loyalty to than a client of shorter duration, even though that latter client might be the more profitable one.
In our professional world, reputation is everything. People trust us with the money, with the business, with the patrimony. Reputation and having the best name in the industry is everything.
The safety, security, the trust, the responsibility, the recognition that this brand has is a huge benefit for us. It's also a responsibility that every employee carries on their shoulders every day they come to work.
People make the business. And if people have the right ethic and the right training and know that there's a chance to achieve, I think nothing stops the firm.
Our shared responsibilities encapsulate the history, the values, and the reputation of Citi. We share a responsibility to our clients to think of their interests first and to come up with innovative products and services designed to satisfy their needs. We have a shared responsibility to each other to create the kind of environment in which we'd all like to work, an environment that's a meritocracy, that's honest and open, that provides for candid dialogue and is supportive. Regardless of the business or location in the world, we must work together as one company, one Citi. And we have a shared responsibility to the franchise. Citi is the greatest franchise in financial services and one of the greatest franchises in all business history. We have a responsibility to the people who came before us and spent nearly 200 years building this great institution. And we have a responsibility to those who will come after us. How we measure ourselves is in part defined by how we perform as citizens of the community. At Citi, volunteerism is one of our core values and is not only encouraged, but rewarded. Every eligible employee can take a paid day off for volunteering their time to a charitable cause. We support financial education and have committed $200 million over 10 years because we believe making capital available can raise the quality of life for individuals and families and strengthen communities. We also promote microfinance because everyone deserves access to quality financial services. And when disaster strikes, Citi demonstrates what is possible when we join together to help others in need rebuild their lives. Citi also takes responsibility for being a steward of the global environment, and we are proud of our leading role in drafting and adopting the Equator Principles that clearly define social and environmental guidelines for sustainable development. Global values help determine our environmental policies. They drive our community initiatives, foster volunteerism, and promote philanthropy. In principle and in practice, Citi proves there is a way to take care of the planet and still offer customers the world.
Our goal
Nuestra misión
is to be the most respected
más respetada do mundo.
global financial services company.
I am privileged,
Proud
proud
and honored
to be a part of Citi.